So excited to be here today with Anne Moore Armstrong, who is a U.S. creative agent at the Bright Agency. And she spent more than 20 years working in the publishing world and works with a lot of illustrators. And we're going to learn about how she works with illustrators and what she looks for in the talent that she hires, and help you guys get a better sense of what it'll take to become a published children's book authors or illustrator. So thank you so much, Anne, for being here.
Oh, I'm so delighted to be here. Thank you, Cassie.
So before we jump in, why don't we talk about how did you get into the publishing industry, and can you talk a little bit about your career before you joined the Bright Agency?
Right. So I started in publishing, supporting 7 editors at a photography and art imprint in Boston for Little Brown. And I learned a lot about book design and about acquisitions of books. And then I moved to support the art director of children's books at Little Brown. And that was really where, children's books became my passion. And I took classes at night in book design, and then I became a book designer and moved over to Candlewick Press in Boston. And I was in the art department there, designing books, from board books to picture books to some YA novel covers, and working with the art director and creative director there. My my job morphed into kind of helping the creative director with the visual, with the finding illustrators for all the stories, and so I became kind of like the visual hub for Candlewick Press, and I would collect portfolios, meet with agents, and then propose artists for the different stories that the editors had shared with me. And so we had a really collaborative, wonderful, visual kind of meeting of minds to decide on who would illustrate a book. So that's kind of my publishing path in children's books.
That's awesome. Before we go on, can you try turning your volume up just a little bit? I'm apparently a lot louder than you. So at the bottom of your video, it says audio, and then there's a microphone with a little drop down, and you could just slide the bar to make it louder.
Oh, there we go. Is that any better?
Yes, that's perfect.
Okay.
Awesome. So then you went from the publishing side, so kind of designing and figuring out where to find the illustrators, to becoming an agent. So can you talk about what that transition was like, and what you do now at the Bright Agency?
Yeah, absolutely. So I made a career move, and I became an agent. And what that looks like is, it's wonderful. Basically, I represent different artists with different styles, and I develop their portfolios, and I pitch their work to editors and art directors worldwide, definitely in New York and all over the US, also to editors and art directors in different publishing companies worldwide. So the transition for me was, definitely challenging, but it was using all my skill set to basically help illustrators understand how to illustrate a picture book or a book in general, and develop characters, and just create portfolio pieces that editors and art directors would feel confident about hiring the artist.
And I love that you went from publishing to being an art agent, because I think in the publishing world, you got to see all of the illustrators and hire lots of different types. And I think you kind of see the value that, like, if you have a really great illustrator, they can go really far with their career. And then becoming an agent, you get to pick a handful of illustrators that, like, you really know can do the work, and like show them how to take it to the next level. So I think that's such a great kind of transition.
And that's so true about an agent, is knowing your artist and knowing their strengths, also knowing kind of their ability to create pieces, to stretch, to also just knowing their life. I mean, they have other commitments, they have a workload, they have working styles. Some are very quick, some take more time. And so really being able to manage them and how they work and what their expectations are is a big part of my job.
That's awesome. And I think that it's just such a cool evolution. So, can you talk about a few of the artists that you represent and some of the books that you've worked on?
Oh, sure thing. So when I first joined the Bright Agency, I was able to ask David Litchfield to come on board with me, and his first picture book is The Bear and the Piano, and we were just super excited about him because his first picture book happened to be the Waterstone Prize winner in the UK. So, but what I saw with David was I had been following him on Twitter for years working at Candlewick, loved his work, but definitely saw that he needed to like move into the picture book realm, and he was doing more sophisticated kind of adult quirky work, which I loved, but it was really about pulling out the gold for picture books that I really desired to do with him. And he's an amazing illustrator, so that's one that I represent exclusively. And then other people, this is a new picture book by Daniel Duncan. And what I also do is I develop author illustrated stories with my artists, those that want to write, that want to develop their own stories. I help them, you know, work out the kinks so that it is ready to show an editor or art director. I also represent, this is by Chronicle Books, sorry, I want to make sure it gets in there, Stefan Lomp, really talented fellow, another author illustrated picture book. And another U.S. artist that I'm so thrilled to represent is Becca Statlander, and this is her picture book with Chronicle, also Sleep Tight Farm. And, you know, with Becca and David, I just see that it really is about communication and project management, and they're so talented, but they take it to the next level of really responding and working very well with schedules and commitments.
That's what I always, from everyone I interview that hires artists, I always ask, like, what's the number one thing you look for? And they're like, they can meet a deadline. Like, number one thing, if you can meet deadlines, like, you get so many brownie points. And I think people forget how important that is.
And that's why with an agent, you really are looking out for, you know, what are the other projects they're working on, so that you're creating a feasible schedule for them that isn't going to crash, you know, midpoint or at the end. Oh, I can't deliver the artwork because I have 3 other books, you know, going on. So it really is about project management and also expectations and knowing your artist's work style and how long they take to do sketches, how long they take to create final art. Are they getting the feedback from the art director in a timely way so that they can move on to the next stage? So it's really moving the process along.
Yeah, and you learn a lot of, I guess, about their quirks and personalities of just like what things kind of hold them back and what things inspire them and kind of help kind of direct that, which I think everyone needs in their life.
Absolutely. And that's where it's like a mentor and an advocate and a friend and a listener, but also like a supervisor. Like I'm wearing many different hats because in the end, you want them to succeed. You want the client to be happy. You want a great book. I mean, everybody, you know, you just want everyone working well together. So as an agent, I'm facilitating that process.
That's awesome. So what do you look for in the artists that you represent when you're picking new illustrators?
Yeah, so I absolutely look at kind of, do they have like a signature style that's identifiable? Can they draw, number one, you know, draw anatomy, gestures, you know, just the basics for sure, but also just, are they using, you know, more intentional palettes or creating believable settings? But I really look for emotional content too. Can they create, you know, a character where you're drawn in to their dilemma or to their situation? I'm sorry, I'm thinking about like a mole and his dilemma. There's so many animal characters, but really it's all about like creating a believable setting or a funny setting. I'm looking for humor, gesture, nuance, those kind of things.
And so what are some of the skills, and I think you kind of covered this a little bit, the skills an artist should develop if they want to be in the children's book industry? And I know a lot of it is kind of like character development, you know, being able to tell a story and build the background. Can you talk a little bit about what those main skills are?
Absolutely. First and foremost, I really feel like attitude is huge. Like being willing to do hard work, being willing to grow and to develop. But also, like you said, developing characters and just being able to, in children's books, you really have to be able to draw a character through the entire book consistently so that, you know, the size of the head doesn't change or, you know, all that kind of thing. So it's different than portraits or paintings because that's kind of a one-off. But with illustration and book illustration, you're really carrying a character through time and space and emotions and range of action that's happening. And so that's what I'm looking for as I'm looking at portfolios and I'm looking at other books that they've published, perhaps, you know, how do they do that? And are they also bringing something else to the table, to the story, maybe a subtext or, you know, some stories are very simple, but what the illustrator brings to the story adds a whole other dimension of meaning and humor or pathos or whatever it is. So
Yeah,
that's
and
what
I
I'm
think that you know, you really do, in order to be published, you have, or to be a published illustrator, you have to have quite a bit of experience because there's such a wide range of skills you have to have, but then also being able to kind of move on the fly. If the art director wants something totally different, or, you know, if they want this character to do something you've never drawn before, like, you know, you kind of have to be adaptable, I would assume.
Absolutely. And that's one thing I try to kind of preempt the process with my artists and just let them know, you know, be expected to be doing some revisions on your sketches because art directors and publisher and editors they're hiring you to definitely use your conceptual creative skills and bring something, you know, deliver something fresh and new, but then they take that and they might say, could you maybe shift the perspective or have it be aerial or show this character close up or whatever it is. There's a back and forth because they're looking at, you know, they're very good at what they do. They're pacing their books, they're crafting the book, and so they want to make it a dynamic experience for the child and parent or whoever's reading the book. And so they are going to usually ask for revisions and not to be upset about that, but just to expect a collaborative process.
Right. No, that makes sense. Where do you find new talent? Are you always looking for new talent, or do you have a core group of artists that you work with ongoing?
Well, I'm always looking because I love to look, and I'm also just looking for someone to join my list. I have an exclusive list of 7 that I represent, but I also have a list from the Bright Agency of picture book artists, about 20, 25 that I'm always pitching to publishers. So I'm building my own exclusive list, and there are other agents at the Bright Agency who are building their lists also, and they have different sensibilities and aesthetics and strengths. So yes, I'm always looking, and but I am selective for sure. But there are some that, you know, sometimes you just see something and you just know I can pull the gold out of that, and it's kind of hidden, but it needs to come out, and so. Those are challenges I love, but I also am kind of looking at even published illustrators who might want, you know, a fresh start or something, some more challenges, and, you know, to work with someone who's experienced in publishing and
Yeah.
building their list. So it's really a range of people I'm looking for.
Great. And one of my questions I had here is, and this is a good time to ask, should an artist approach publishers directly before they have an agent, or should they try and get an agent first? What's kind of your recommendation? Actually, I'm sorry, I want to back up because I skipped another question and I think we should go in order.
Go for it. No
Okay.
problem.
So the next one is, what makes someone's portfolio stand out and get your attention from all the rest?
Yeah. Well, today, you know, everything's online. So we used to look at traditional portfolios and flip through them, but now you're looking at websites and Tumblrs and Instagrams and all of that, and it's fabulous to see everything. I think clarity is really important to show what style or styles that you feel strong about, that you're good at. I think showing too many styles then looks like you might not be clear on what your style is. So if you do have a number of styles, I would pick 2 or 3 to highlight that are your strengths. And then the art director or the agent could get to know you more and see the other styles. But I think I really love when someone uses a fresh new palette and just uses color almost as a character and just uses it in a fresh new way. So I'm kind of looking for that. I'm looking for kind of idiosyncratic lines that are a little bit, not rigid and perfect, but more human and just organic in a way. So just people who can capture emotion, capture gesture, action, all those things. It's really a lot to ask, but there are some unbelievably talented people.
I know every time I'm looking through when people will send me portfolios or start following us on Instagram, I'm always like, oh my, like I just love all of them. Like I want to look at all of the art because there's such a wide range of talent in the way that people use color and lines and just like really simple things. So my next question here, when should an artist approach an agent? So, how established should they be before they start approaching agents?
Well, number one, I think it depends, but there is a wonderful organization called the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, SCBWI, and they actually are a great community if you're just starting out or you just want a community that's going to be helping you hone your skills, read your manuscripts, look at your dummy, look at your artwork, your portfolio. They have chapters all over the nation, and I would start there if just so you're not kind of solo, diving in. And also just approaching agents. Every agency has kind of a submissions policy, but what I would suggest is that you have a good, strong portfolio of at least, oh gosh, it's hard to say, but 12 to 20 images. Not just 2 or 3 that are strong, but really showing that you have a strong portfolio range. And, people look at your website, and if it's kind of chaotic or messy or, unclear, that kind of can put people off and be telling. So I would just make sure you have a really fresh, clear, clean website that showcases your work well.
And I think, when we talk about approaching agents, something you said was really smart. When you said there are all these agents within the Bright Agency, and each of them have their different artists, and they all have their different kind of interests and styles. And so when you're looking for agents, I think people forget that you are a person. You are people too. And doing a little bit of research, I see that you are like really focused on characters. Like a good character can just pull you in. And so, if you look at the agents that you're approaching too, I think you can figure out like what's that thing that just really gets them excited and kind of, showcase that in your work. Do you agree? Kind of just have you seen that different kind of styles with different agents?
Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, in a way, now everything is kind of available to see. You have such access to people and what their passions are, their interests are, and on Twitter or Facebook, wherever, Instagram. So you really can glean quite a bit just by seeing who they represent or what styles they are enjoying or liking or publishing. And so, yeah, there's plenty of information out there to kind of see where you might fit in as an artist or an illustrator.
Yeah. And so do you recommend do they just need to have a strong portfolio of work before they approach an agent, or should they have a concept for a story or an idea for a character or something that the agent can kind of hook on to?
Right. Well, first off, many illustrators are not writing stories. They just illustrate, and they're creating incredible work. And so you don't have to have a story in order to approach an agent. I'm an illustration agent, and so I'm mainly looking for illustrators. When I find an illustrator that can also write stories and wants to do that, I want to help facilitate that development, but and that goal, but that's not a prerequisite to approaching an illustration agent. You just have to have a strong portfolio that's targeted to children, and that's just research and knowing, picture books or middle grade novels or chapter books, whatever age group your illustration style targets.
And Dan has a question here. Do you help artists find writers to collaborate on a project? So when you're pitching the illustrators to the publishers, are you pitching them with a writer, or are you kind of pitching them and then the publisher finds the writer?
So I pitch artwork all the time, no matter what, to art directors and editors without a text in mind, just to say, look at this fresh work, look at this new style, check this out. I also pitch work to editors who have a text already that they've shared with me or they've described to me. They say, oh, I have a fire truck text that I really need a young illustrator for. Do you have any samples you can send me? So I put together a light box and kind of curate that and send that along, knowing their aesthetic, knowing their list, their publishing house, that, and age target, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. So that, in that case, obviously there's already an author that the editor has acquired their text. In other cases, I do have illustrators who have great conceptual ideas for stories, but they haven't written them, and they don't really have the time to write the story, nor necessarily the ability. Mm-hmm. So there have been a couple of cases where we try to match up an author that we know, and we're doing that a little bit more as an agency, but again, it's kind of like dependent on the situation, who we have access to, all of that.
Yeah. And I think, in the way that, the way the artists think about pitching agents is a lot the way the agents pitch publishers, where, within the publishers, different editors are working on books in different ways, and they work with different kinds of writers. And I think the beauty of working with an agent is that you guys have those relationships, and like, who's going to be willing to do it, who's easy to work with, you can kind of cut through all of that, where it could take years for an illustrator just to navigate through all of the politics and rules.
Yeah, and that's one of the strengths of having an agent, is they know the editors, and some editors really dive in and craft a text, even if it's very minimal what they get. They craft it and create the text. They also have authors that are raring to go, and so they might say, can you write a story to match this artwork, this character and this situation. So there's so many ways that editors work, and then other editors don't want to have anything to do with that. They just want to see a really solid text, a really solid story, and go for it. Yeah. So yeah, it is all about knowing the editors and the relationships we have established already, and that's really where the strength of having an agent comes in. The experience, the relationships, knowing the houses, knowing the imprints, knowing the aesthetics, and the sensibilities of certain editors and art directors, for sure.
And Dan has another great question here. So we have a few more minutes, guys, and we might be able to take 2 or 3 more questions. So if you have them, you can type them here in the chat room. So Dan says, is it better to approach an agent directly? Does an agency have too much to do to consider a new artist?
Oh, absolutely not. We have monthly artist meetings where all the agents get together and we look at submissions, and we weigh whether we believe that we could be, an asset to the artist, and also whether our clients are looking for that style of work, or whether we think we should develop the artist more first before asking them to join the agency. So I actually didn't hear the beginning of that question, but I think I'm answering it.
Yeah, no, you did. The first part was, is it better to approach an agent directly? So should they pitch you directly?
Oh, I see. I think that's, well, I can just speak for the Bright Agency, and it's fine to do that. It's just that then the agent will either be absolutely thrilled and sign them up right away, or they'll share it with the rest of the team. We'll look at it monthly, the next month, and then we'll decide together. Because we really, at the Bright Agency, we have so many different arms. There's a licensing arm, there's commercial books, there's trade books, there's fiction, there's education. And so we really look at it totally like, how can this artist do well, make a living, build their career, just really looking at it holistically. And so they're not just with one agent necessarily, they have access to many arms in the agency.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times artists get discouraged pitching if they don't hear something back or they get negative feedback. And what I've heard from other art directors is that it's a matter of like being at the right time and the right person and the right opportunity and the right style and it all coming together at the right time. And so it's like, that's a lot of things all at once. And so, it's likely you're going to hear no a lot before you hear yes. But when it's the perfect match, that's when something magic happens. I mean, is that kind of what you've seen as well?
It is. I mean, isn't that life in a sense?
Yeah.
There's a lot of investment of time, a lot of seeds planted, a lot of rejections, a lot of, waiting. But I do think, if you're honing your skill, if you're investing the time and developing the work, if you're taking constructive criticism, if you're growing, like I mentioned, SCBWI, and in an organization that is committed to growing your career and helping you with your skills, I really think that synergy or that moment or those opportunities or open doors do come. And I think it's just, yeah, sometimes it happens.
It's a matter of persisting through all of the no's and keeping going. I think that that's where the artists break through.
So true.
Anne's question here, do you give feedback to artists that approach you if you see potential, but if it's not a definite yes?
Yes, I have done that. People have submitted their work. They said, I'd love to join the Bright Agency, or I'd love for you to represent me. And I will I'll give them a quick overall impression and some pointers on development. And, this is what I see. This is what I think would help you take it to the next level or take another step in the right direction. And I have said, but unfortunately, I won't be representing you. But, and sometimes I'll say, come back to me once you've taken some classes or, you've developed more. So absolutely. I mean, agents don't have unlimited time, of course. And so it's all kind of depending on what they can do. But really, that's our business, is to be looking at art and to be developing artists. And so I would love to do that.
Awesome. No, that's great. And I think that from what I've heard, most agents are like, they look at all of the emails you send them. They look at the stuff you mail them. They try to give feedback as much as possible. And I think a lot of artists get nervous to reach out and like that they don't want to bug you. But, it's really like it's an agent's job to go out and find the best art. And so it's like, I think that most of them don't mind getting those kind of emails.
Right. And even artists that are part of the agency sometimes feel that way, because I just had an artist this week, oh, I'm so sorry, I don't think I can make this deadline. This is happening. This just came in. And it's almost like, I'm sorry, I have to call you. But it's like, no, that is my job. That's why I'm here. It's okay. I'm here to advocate for you. I'm here to solve this problem, and work with the client and work with you. So, I think artists, some just get it, and then others are kind of isolated and aren't, maybe a little bit more insecure about working with an agent or working with art directors. But I think the more they can communicate, the better, for sure.
Yeah. And I see that too, that most artists and most children's illustrators are working from home by themselves in a studio, and they don't get a lot of feedback and a lot of interaction and a lot of discussing their art. And so it can be overwhelming. And like, it's just like to have the confidence to kind of put themselves out there can be really scary. And I've also said I've hosted 2 children's illustration workshops, and it was so hard to find instructors because all of the people would email me back and say, I would rather do anything than get on video and talk, present, because it's like they're illustrators, like they sit in their
Funny.
studio. Like they had no interest in presenting, which like makes sense. But I think that, you know, the temperament of being able to have these creative concepts and create this artwork and be in that space, you know, that it takes a special type of personality to do that. And so you should really honor that if that's what you have to out to the world.
And again, it's getting to know your artists and you know, knowing what they're comfortable with and how to challenge them in some ways too. I was just thinking maybe a fix to that would be like showing them from the back, so they're illustrating and doing their thing, but you know, they don't have to look at the camera.
One lady said, she goes, I'll record myself like doing a sketch, but I will not get on camera. So yeah, so they were totally open to that. Thank you so much, Anne, for being here. This was awesome. We got everyone's questions answered, and I really appreciate you taking time. I think it's great for artists to get your perspective, and I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks so much, Cassie.
Thank you, and thanks everyone for joining. Have a great afternoon.
Bye.